And how's it going, guys? How's it going? Let me know how the audio and the visuals are. Let me know if you can hear me and see me clearly. How's it going? We are here to do another stream on the Three Body Problem show. And this time we're going to be really spoiling the books. So this is for readers of the books or people that don't care about spoilers, people that want to be spoiled. So that's what we're gonna do. I've gone through the episodes again, and I pulled out some significant things that I want to talk about. Of course, I can't talk about absolutely everything because then this video would be like, I don't know, like 10 hours or something. So, yeah, I pulled out some really interesting things that we're going to go over. And yeah, we're going to dive deep into it. And I see some people have become members. I will shout out everybody that became a member and the super chats at the end after everything's done so we can just like get through it all first. And once again, I got my slides ready to go. So we're ready. We're nice and prepared. So yeah, and it should be a pretty good time. So first of all, I hope everybody had a great weekend. I hope those of you that celebrate Easter enjoyed Easter. So yeah, how's everybody doing? How's everybody been? How's everybody been? Yeah, I haven't heard any concrete news on season two, but from what I can tell, they definitely plan to do more seasons. And as I said in my last video on this, it does. I don't think you would hire David and Dan without, I don't think they would take a job like this without the assurance that there'd be multiple seasons. You know what I mean? I just don't think they would. Because, like them or not, they are two of the biggest showrunners in Hollywood. So I think they probably have the assurance of another season to come. And then I have heard that the plan is 3 or 4 seasons. And I definitely do believe that certainly at this pace that we can get through all of the books in 3 to 4 seasons. All right. So everyone's doing great. I'm glad everybody could hear me and see me. So I see no reason not to get right on started. All right. So the first episode. The first episode is a lot of setup. The first episode is setting up a bunch of mysteries and building a bunch of mysteries. But what I want to talk about more so is the events of the second episode, right? So in episode 2, we see that Yao Wenji has sent a message in outer space using the amplification of the sun. So we've sent someone said my audio is low, so I'm just like raising it a little bit. So we see in episode 2 that Yao Wenji has used the sun to amplify a message in outer space because the messages that they were trying to send would have been far too weak. So she uses the power of the sun to magnify this message. And 8 years later, she receives a message back. But there is definitely something peculiar about this message. The message we sent out was entirely friendly, but their message says, do not respond. Do not respond. Why would an alien race warn us that they are hostile? Because it wasn't the race, it was the individual. So the question really is, who is the listener? And we don't really learn who the listener is, what is the deal with this listener until the end of the book. But in the show, we still don't know. We don't have this scene in the show. So we're going to go through who the listener is based off what we see in the books, right? So I've pulled a few quotes that talk about the listener, that talk about what it's like to live on Trisolaris. So we're going to go through these quotes and break down exactly who this person on the other end, who this being on the other end of this communication was, right? All right, so this is from the end of the first book. Initially, each listening post had several hundred listeners, but as technology advanced, there was only one person on duty. And by the way, this data is transcribed from the Trisolarian data, but it has no descriptions of what the Trisolarians look like. So it's interpreted. So when I say person, I'm referring to a Trisolarian individual. Being a listener was a humble career. Though they lived in listening posts that were kept at a constant temperature, with support systems that guaranteed their survival without requiring them to dehydrate during chaotic cycles, they also had to live their lives within the narrow confines of these tiny spaces. The amount of joy they got from stable eras was far less than others got. The listener at post 1379 looked through the tiny window at the world of Trisolaris outside. This was a chaotic era night. The giant moon had not yet risen, and most people remained dehydrated in hibernation. Even plants had instinctively dehydrated and turned into lifeless bundles of dry fiber lying against the ground. So this was an interesting point, because he says even the plants had dehydrated. So that shows you that everything, not just the Trisolarians, everything on this world has evolved to adapt to these rapid changes in environment. Everything. So even the plants have instinctively dehydrated themselves. And I'll continue. Under the starlight, the ground looked like a giant sheet of cold metal. This was the loneliest time. In the deep silence of midnight, the universe revealed itself to its listeners as a vast desolation. What the listener of post 1379 disliked the most was seeing the waves that slowly crawled across the display, a visual record of the meaningless noise the listening post picked up from space. He felt this interminable wave was an let me start over. He felt this interminable wave was an abstract view of the universe, one end connected to the endless past, the other to the endless future, and in the middle only the ups and downs of random chance, without life, without pattern, the peaks and valleys at different heights like uneven grains of sand, the whole curve like a one-dimensional desert made of the grains of sand lined up in a row, lonely, desolate, so long that it was intolerable. You could follow it and go forward or backwards as long as you liked, but you'd never find the end. So the listener is an individual, just like Yao Winchi. He's listening for communication from outer space at one of these listening posts. An insignificant individual. In fact, he's on the lower end of the social hierarchy of the Trisolarian society. So Trisolaris is utilitarian. They are brutal society. The overall society always takes precedence over the individual. Those like the listener who worked at isolated listening posts live these lonely, desolate, repetitive lives devoid of any kind of joy. And then, suddenly, here comes what they've been listening for, what they've been waiting for all of this time. A message from another world. And I'll read this excerpt. On this day, however, the listener saw something odd when he glanced at the waveform display. Even experts had a hard time telling with the naked eye whether a waveform carried information, but the listener was so familiar with the noise of the universe that he could tell that the wave that now moved in front of his eyes had something extra. The thin curve rising and falling seemed to possess a soul. He was certain that the radio signal before him had been modulated by intelligence. He rushed in front of another terminal and checked the computer's rating of the signal's recognizability, a red 10. Before this, no radio signal received by the listening post had ever garnered a recognizability rating above blue 2. A red rating meant the likelihood that the transmission contained intelligent information was greater than 90%. A rating of red 10 meant the received transmission contained a self-interpreting coding system. The deciphering computer worked at full power. Still caught up by the dizzying excitement and confusion, the listener stared at the waveform display. Information continued to stream from the universe into the antenna. Because of the self-interpreting code, the computer was able to perform real-time translation, and the message began to show up immediately. The listener opened the resulting document, and for the first time, a Trisolarian read a message from another world. And it's the same painfully optimistic message that they send out in the show. With the best of intentions, we look forward to establishing contact with other civilized societies in the universe. We look forward to working together with you to build a better life in this vast universe. Just painfully optimistic, painfully naive. And this is what I love about this. I love how optimistic humanity's message is. It would prove in the end to be extremely naive, as I said. So the Trisolarans receive our message. And if you listen closely, like I said, you hear this message being transmitted in the show. And our message is a message of peace, but it ultimately doesn't matter. At this point, however, Trisolaris still does not know where Earth is, right? They can tell the direction, but they cannot tell. There's billions of stars in any given direction, so they can't tell where Earth is. We need to respond first. We need to respond. But what leads this individual listener? What leads listener to betray his own people? What leads listener to warn us? All right, we'll get into it. Here's another excerpt. During the next 2 Trisolaran hours, the listener learned of the existence of Earth, learned of the world that had only one sun and remained always in a stable era, learned of the human civilization that had been born in a paradise where the climate was eternally mild. The transmission from the solar system ended. The deciphering computer now ran uselessly. The post was once again only hearing the noise of the universe, but the listener was certain that what he had just experienced was not a dream. He knew as well that the several thousand listening posts spread across Trisolaris had also received this message. Which Trisolaran civilization had awaited for eons? 200 cycles of civilization had been crawling through a dark tunnel, and there was finally a glimmer of light before them. The listener read over the message from Earth again. His thoughts drifted over the blue ocean that never froze, the green forest and fields, enjoying the warm sunlight and the caress of a cool breeze. What a beautiful world. The paradise we imagined really exists. So the listener learns of Earth, and he's entranced. He's entranced by this idea of this paradise world. This is the dream of all of Trisolaran society. Because our world, the Earth, is a mother. The Earth nurtures us, while their world rejects them, essentially. It does everything it can to try and kill them. So while thinking of the beauty of this paradise, while holding this beautiful dream of this paradise within his mind, something dawns upon this Trisolaran listener. And here's another excerpt from the first book. The listener woke up from his nightmare and saw the giant moon just risen, casting a thin ray of cold light through the small window. He looked at the frozen ground outside the window and reviewed his lonely life. By now he had lived 600,000 Trisolaran hours. The life expectancy of Trisolarans ranged between 700 to 800,000 Trisolaran hours. Most people, of course, would have lost the ability to work productively long before then. They would have been forcibly dehydrated, and the resulting dry fibers cast into the flames. This is what I meant by the Trisolarans being utilitarian. It's all about the benefit of the society. The individual does not matter. If you cannot work, you're forcibly dehydrated. You're essentially put to death. So it's a utilitarian society, and it's all about the society over the individual. Let's see, where was I? The Trisolarans did not keep the idol around, but now the listener saw another possibility. It was inaccurate to say that the receipt of the extraterrestrial of the extra Trisolaran message had no influence on his life. After confirmation, Trisolaris would surely reduce the number of listening posts, and posts like this one behind the times would be among the first to be cut. Then he would be unemployed. A listener's skills were very specialized, consisting of only some routine operations and maintenance. It would be very difficult to find another job. If he couldn't find a job within 5,000 Trisolarian hours, he would be forcibly dehydrated and then burnt. The only way to escape this fate was to mate with a member of the opposite sex. And here's where we get a little bit of insight on Trisolarian biology, and this is actually really cool. When that happened, the organic material making up their bodies would meld into one. 2/3 of the material would then become fuel to power the biochemical reaction that would completely renew the cells in the remaining 1/3 to create a new body. Then this body would divide into 3 to 5 tiny new lives, their children. So that is how the Trisolarians mate. 2 of them merge together and their bodies regenerate, and then it splits into several little Trisolarians. They would inherit some of the memories of their parents, continue their lives, and begin the cycle of life anew. But given the listener's low social position, lonely and enclosed workspace, and advanced age, what member of the opposite sex would be interested in him? In the last few years, the listener had asked himself millions of times, "Is this all there is to my life?" And millions of times he had answered himself, "Yes, this is all there is. All that you have in this life is the endless loneliness and the tiny space of this listening post." He couldn't lose that paradise, even if it was only a dream. So, essentially, Trisolarian life is really, really hard, especially if you're on like the lower echelons of society. It's all misery. There's basically no hope. And like I said, here we get more insight into the life cycle of the Trisolarians. And obviously, thematically, all of this about like the way the Trisolarians live is a reflection of, I think, humanity. In what humanity seems to be becoming in a lot of ways. It's the state before the individual. I get the sense of, inner cities where people are squeezed into smaller and smaller apartment buildings and, essentially forced to work repetitive, meaningless jobs for almost no money, barely enough to live. And it would be really hard to live that kind of life and find purpose also. That is what the listener is going through. And he also realizes that if the Trisolarians conquer Earth, if the Trisolarians do come to Earth, he's not going to live to see the benefit of it anyway. And in fact, the news of Earth would ultimately negatively impact his life. He would lose his job. And on a deeper level, on the deepest level, he simply does not want this beautiful dream of this earthly paradise to be ruined. So that's essentially why he warns us. And what the listener also does know is that Trisolaris, like I said earlier, they cannot find the Earth unless the Earth responds. All right, and I pulled another quote from this section of the book as well. And this is pretty key. The listener knew that at the scale of the universe, due to the lack of a sufficiently long measurement baseline, it was impossible to determine the distance of a source of a low-frequency radio transmission from space, only the direction. The source could be high-powered but far away, or low-powered but close by. In that direction were billions of stars, each shining against a sea of other stars at different distances. Without knowing how far away the source was, it was impossible to ascertain the exact coordinates. Distance. The key was distance. Indeed, there was an easy way to ascertain the distance of the transmission source. Just respond to the message. And if the other party replies quickly to the response, the Trisolarians could determine the distance based on the round-trip time and the speed of light. Or maybe they would take a really long time to reply and cause the Trisolarians to be unable to determine how long the message was en route. But the question was, would the other party reply? Since the source had actively sent out a call into the universe, it was very likely that they would reply after getting a response from Trisolaris. And the listener was sure that the Trisolarian government had already given the order to send a message to that distant world to lure them to respond. Maybe the message had already been sent out, but maybe not. If the latter was true, then the listener had a singular chance to make his own humble life glow. The listener dashed in front of the operations screen and composed a short, simple message on the computer. He directed the computer to translate the message into the same language as the message received from the Earth. Then he pointed the listening post antenna in the direction the message from Earth had come from. The transmit button was a red rectangle. The listener's fingers hovered above it. The fate of Trisolaran civilization was now tied to these slender fingers. Without hesitation, the listener pressed the button. A high-powered radio wave carried a short message, a message that could save another civilization into the darkness of space. Do not answer, do not answer, do not answer. So the listener is entirely aware of what he has done. He has betrayed his own world in favor of another race of beings. But what the listener wasn't planning on, however, was that the person on the other end, Yao Wenji, would also be a traitor to her own world. Yao Wenji is a direct, I think, juxtaposition of listener. They are two like opposites, or they're opposite and the same. She's betraying her world, he's betraying his world. Both of them are technically trying to save the Earth, so they just both have different ways of going about it. So that is essentially why the listener decides to betray his world. And he is punished by Trisolaris. He's punished by Trisolarans for what he's done. Essentially, his punishment is to not be dehydrated. It's pretty interesting. The Trisolarans is ruled by, I guess, a king-like figure, an emperor-like figure called the Princeps. And the Princeps basically tells listener that his punishment is to live. His punishment is to live and to see his precious Earth colonized by the Trisolarans. So the listener is forced to watch. And the listener does come back up later in the books. We do hear a little bit more about listener later. So yeah, that's who the listener was. That's who the listener was. So we're going to move on to the next topic. And yeah, that's also one of the coolest parts of the book. Like I said, if you are interested in learning more about the Trisolarans, that section of the book where it's on the Trisolaran homeworld and it's like the transcribed data that they've collected from ETO, it's one of the best parts of the book. So definitely check that out if you have not read that part of the book. All right, so next we're going to talk about episode 3. So in episode 3, Raj is dead, and Raj is of course Zhang Beihai. His dad tells a story about his time in the military. And to me, this was a really interesting part of the show. And if you weren't really thinking about it, you might maybe miss what the point of this all was. So he talks about how during a storm, his men were dying. They were low on resources. He essentially sneaks up to an enemy camp and kills the enemies and brings their resources back to his own people. To me, this is an obvious metaphor for the Dark Forest, right? And this is a quote from the second book. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization an armed hunter stalking through the trees like a ghost, gently pushing aside branches that block the path and trying to tread without sound. Even breathing is done with care. The hunter has to be careful, because everywhere in the forest are stealthy hunters like him. If he finds another life, another hunter, an angel or a demon, a delicate infant or a tottering old man, a fairy or a demigod, there's only one thing he can do: open fire and eliminate them. In this forest, hell is other people, an eternal threat that any life that exposes its own existence will be swiftly wiped out. This is the picture of cosmic civilization. It's the explanation for the Fermi paradox. Now, the Fermi paradox is mentioned a couple times in the show. So that is the Dark Forest hypothesis. So my camp needs resources, but I know of the existence and the location of another camp that has resources. To ensure the survival of my people, it is rational to eliminate the other camp and acquire their resources. Now, if the other camp had known of my presence and the presence of my men, it would also have been rational for them to preemptively eliminate my camp, because though my camp is currently weaker, we still pose a threat. And that is what Raj's dad's story illustrates. It is essentially the dark forest hypothesis. And this is one of the central ideas in this book series. Everything in this book series is basically about the dark forest hypothesis. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit. But I just wanted to point out that this story, pay attention to the story because there's so much meaning. There's a lot of meaning. So let's move on to the next idea that I wanted to talk about. Also in this episode, in the same scene, Jin mentions multiple dimensions. And several other times in the series, they reference multiple dimensions, and she talks about multiple dimensions a few times in the series. At one point, she even makes reference to 10 dimensions, and there is a reason for all of this. There's a reason for all of this, and there's a reason specifically for the reference to 10 dimensions. It's all setting up major. It's all setting up major events that will take place later. Later in the books, deeper in space, when humans are traveling deeper in space, they start to discover these bubbles in space. And these bubbles are essentially fragments of the fourth dimension. And there's actually an interesting thought experiment that's presented here. Everything in space is moving. Everything in space is moving all the time. Our planet, our sun, the solar system itself, the galaxy itself, it's hurling through space right now. If these bubbles, these fragments of the fourth dimension have always existed, then it is very well possible that humanity has encountered them before on Earth. We could be passing through a fourth dimensional bubble right now. But what exactly is a fragment of the fourth dimension? What's a fragment of the fourth dimension? What does that even mean? Well, we learn in the series that the universe's original state, the original state of this universe that we currently inhabit, was actually 10-dimensional. There were 10 dimensions, and those dimensions have been degraded over time. Now, the reason for this is pretty complex, and I'm not going to get into this right now, but if you're more interested into the reason that the dimensions have degraded, check out my 3-body problem playlist. I go over this in detail. Now, these fragments of the fourth dimension that they encountered were essentially like ponds that were drying up. So as the fourth dimension shrunk and shrunk and shrunk and died and dried up, these bubbles became smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's why we're encountering these little bubbles, because the universe used to be entirely fourth dimensional at one point. And now only tiny little bubbles of the fourth dimension exist. And like I said, the reason that these dimensions are degrading, we'll get into that maybe in another video, because that's actually a whole lot that I don't want to open up right now. Also, Jin mentions here, she kind of hints at the fact here that folded up within these smaller dimensions, the second dimension, for instance, is actually a lot of space. So much space, in fact, that there could be entire universes with life contained within a single proton. In fact, that is how the Trisolarans create the supercomputer Sophon, by unfolding the hidden dimensions of the proton. And to me, that's super interesting. Just one second. To me, I do have a slide about that. No, I don't have a slide. I thought I had a slide on... Oh, that's later. That's later. Let me not get ahead of myself. Yeah. I'm going to save that for when we talk about Judgment Day. So just keep in your mind right now that the Sophon, they unfold the hidden dimensions of the proton. And I have a few quotes from when that happens in the book, and I think these are pretty interesting. And it shows that the show actually, although it's taking liberties, it's relatively close. So this is actually on the Trisolaran homeworld. These are Trisolarans communicating with each other. Of course, that's impossible. The etching of micro-integrated circuits can only occur at the macro scale, and only on a macroscopic two-dimensional plane. Thus, we must unfold a proton into 2 dimensions. Unfold a 9-dimensional structure in 2 dimensions? How big would the area be? Very big, as you will see. The science console smiled. We have already written the software to allow a Sophon to unfold itself into 2 dimensions. After the unfolding is complete, the huge plane can wrap itself around the Earth. This software can adjust the membrane so that it's transparent, but the degree of transparency can be tuned in the frequencies of cosmic microwave background. And this is how they make the universe flicker, essentially. Of course, the Sophons fold and unfold into different dimensions. They can also... Of course, as Sophons unfold and unfold into different dimensions, they can also display even more amazing miracles. So this is essentially explaining what we also see in the show in episode 5 when they're talking about like the Sophon and how it unfolds and it covers the entire Earth. This is a Sophon that's playing with things on an atomic level. It's manipulating things on atomic level. Now, Sophons are also, and they get into this in the show, but it happens very quickly. The Sophons are also quantum entangled. So firstly, the word quantum. What does the word quantum mean? So quantum refers to the minimum unit of any physical entity involved, the minimum units of any physical entity involved in interaction. So we're dealing with the very smallest of things when we use the word quantum. Now, quantum entanglement is a phenomenon that occurs in nature. It's also called the quantum non-local connection sometimes. Essentially, this is when the quantum states of 2 objects are linked together. And this is in such a way that essentially one object can no longer be adequately described without full mention of its counterpart. So these objects are linked together, and there seems to be this kind of instantaneous transfer of information. Now, this is, of course, a layman's interpretation because I'm obviously not a physicist, but that's my understanding of quantum entanglement. Usually instantaneous transfer of information is impossible. That's why these Sophons have to be quantum entangled on the quantum level. So this is how the Sophons are able to communicate in real time with Trisolaris from Earth instantly. This is the benefits of the protons being bound on the quantum level to each other. So that is the deal with the protons, and that's a part of like what the idea is with the multiple dimensions. But like I said, we'll get into more of this in just a little bit. Now, I do have another slide. So also in this episode, Jin figures out that the Trisolaran star system is trisolar. She essentially figures out that it's a trisolar star system and that it's unsolvable. And her and Jack go to ETO to meet up with Tatiana. And they learn basically that the Santi are coming. They learn essentially what is happening. What is interesting about this is that it kind of seems like they are setting Jin up to be sympathetic to the Santi, sympathetic to the Trisolarans. They explain that Jin was also displaced from her home, and that she's kind of like lost her home, and so she's wondering like the Trisolarans are. So I wonder if the reason they're doing this is because they're setting Jin up to be the one that commits Changxin's future actions in the books. But I also think that Agi's character fits that aspect of Changxin better. So, of course, I'm referring to Des in the sword holder incident. Essentially, the character in the book, Changxin, is granted the sole power to destroy both Trisolaris and Earth. If the Trisolarans attack, essentially. So deterrence was held for many years by Luoji, aka Saul in the show. And this kept the Trisolarans at bay, even though they had the power to destroy humanity. If the Trisolarans attacked, the button would be pressed and the location of Earth and Trisolaris would be revealed to the entire universe. And this would essentially doom both worlds because of what we discussed earlier, the dark forest. The universe is a dark forest, and revealing yourself is bad news. So when the position of the sword holder was passed from Luoji to Shang Xin, the Trisolarans immediately attack because they have determined that Shang Xin does not have what it takes to doom two worlds. She just does not have that in her based off of their calculations. And they are right. Now, considering in the show, considering Agi's reaction to Judgment Day, considering Agi's reaction to Judgment Day and how that affects her, I think she fits this aspect of Shang Xin more than Jin, even though Jin takes most of the major aspects of Shang Xin, you know, like her being involved in the Staircase Project and her connection to Will slash Tian Ming. So also Agi's relationship with Thomas Wade seems reminiscent of Shang Xin's relationship with Thomas Wade, but also so does Jin's relationship with Thomas Wade. So to me, this one is a little bit up in the air. I'm not sure if it will be Agi or Jin, but I have a good feeling that it will be either one of them that becomes the sword holder in the future, the sword holder that essentially dooms the solar system by inaction. So that is what I'm essentially expecting will happen with the sword holder thing. Let's see. And let's see what we got next. So next, moving on from the sword holder topic, I want to talk more about the scene in episode 4, when Mike Evans is talking to the Trisolarans, and we learn that they can't lie. Right? We learn that the Trisolarans can't lie. They don't really get the concept of deception. But the question is, why? Why can't the Trisolarans lie? To understand, you have to learn more about who the Trisolarans are. And I have a few more quotes from the ending of the first book, that delve more into the Trisolarans and how they operate and how they exist. So this will explain a little bit more why they can't lie. In fact, it'll completely explain it. So we'll go through this and it'll help people that are wondering about that understand why lying is not a thing. All of these emotions and other emotions such as fear, sorrow, happiness, and appreciation of beauty were things that the Trisolaran civilization strove to avoid and eliminate. Such emotions caused the individual and society to be weak spiritually and did not help with the survival in the harsh environment of this world. So basically, this is suggesting that the human ability to appreciate things like beauty and art is kind of born out of the fact that we live in a paradise world, essentially, and the Trisolarans never developed these types of things really because their world is so harsh. The mental state that the Trisolarans needed were calmness and numbness. The history of the past 200-some cycles of civilization proved that civilizations that relied on these two states as their spiritual core were the most capable of survival. 1. Okay. So 1. The Trisolarans evolved for extreme survival, like I said. And that is why they can, dehydrate themselves. And it can be argued, I think, that the ability of an individual species, that the ability of individuals in a species to lie to each other could potentially, hinder that species' ability to survive, especially in such a harsh environment. But there is another more direct reason that is found in the second book, Dark Forest, that explains exactly why they can't lie. And basically it's this. The Trisolarans communicate through direct, open thoughts, making them highly deficient at tricks, camouflage, and deception, and giving human civilization a huge advantage over the enemy. So essentially, the Trisolarans can't think without everyone knowing it. Trisolarans have evolved in such a way that renders their thoughts public. So they cannot think without what they're thinking being known to others. Thus, they cannot lie. Thus, they have no concept really of lying. This is a part of the reason that the Wallfacer Project is enacted, the Sophons can see everything on Earth, but they can't read minds. And part of the job of the Wallfacer is to be deceptive, is to deceive the Trisolarians, because not only do they not lie, can they not lie, they don't really have a solid grasp on deception, and especially the intricacies of human deception. So it is their biology, and it is the nature of what it took to survive on their planet that renders them incapable of lying, right? So, but the Trisolarians also end up in the book creating wall breakers. So wall breakers are people on Earth that are meant to figure out what the wall facers are doing and expose them. So we see at the end of the show that Tatiana is given one of the headsets, and it's very clear to me that she is going to go on in the show to be one of the wall breakers. It's almost certain that that's what they're going for. Because once Trisolarians realize that humans can lie, they clearly recognize that this is a threat. This is an advantage in favor of humanity. And this is why they cut off all communication at that time with ETO and with Mike Evans, because they need to reassess the entire situation, because they realize that this is a huge danger. Now, the situation changes over time as the series develops, but that is the current situation. The Trisolarians can't lie, and they don't understand deception. So right now, the humans have a pretty significant advantage. And we'll get into more about this in a little bit. But for right now, we're going to move back and forward. We're going to move to episode 5, and we're going to talk about essentially my favorite scene in the entire show. And it is the scene where we learn about the construction of the Sophon and we see how they did it. I really liked this scene. I really liked how it was referencing things from the books. There were some things that were left out, of course, for time and I think budget as well. But I did really enjoy this scene because I like getting that glimpse into how the Trisolarians created the Sophons. And also, I have to say that the narration in this scene is really good. The actress for Sophon did a great job. And also the sound design and the music in the scene were also really on point. I very much enjoyed this scene. Like I said, this is all, of course, based off of what we see at the end of the first book. And actually, the way the Sophon is described to me is pretty close. It's relatively close to what we see in the book. So I have a few excerpts from the first book from this scene, and we're just going to go through them and talk about what's going on in these scenes. Sophon 1. Are the spatial dimensionality controls operational? I can't speak. I can't read. Sophon 1. Are the spatial dimensionality controls operational? Now, come on. That is kind of a mouthful, right? Affirmative. Sophon 1 is capable of initiating spatial dimensionality adjustments at any moment. Adjust dimensionality to 3. After this command was issued, the two-dimensional proton membrane that wrapped itself around Trisolaris began to shrink rapidly, as though a giant's hand was pulling away the curtain over the world. In a moment, sunlight bathed the ground. The proton folded from 2 dimensions into 3 and became a gargantuan spear in synchronous orbit, about the size of the giant moon. The Sophon was over the dark side of the planet, but the sunlight reflected from its mirror surface turned the night into day. So it's pretty similar, I think, even the way it looks, where they describe the curtain pulled back. I definitely see an effect in the show that looks a little bit like that. And when they talk about like the reflective surface of the Sophon, they kind of nailed that in the show as well. And I also love in the show, I will say, I love the wording in this scene, and it could just be because I love the actress's voice when she says, "We summon energies you cannot imagine and focus them onto a single proton. When we unfold its higher dimensions," and then that noise, that sound design is, it's so good. "A very tiny proton becomes something very large indeed. We create a mind as large as a world." That whole sequence is just, it's just so, in my opinion, it's just well done. And I also like that in the sequence as well in the show, the Sophon mentions that they mention the exponential expansion of human technology, which I cover in a lot of detail in my video, What Makes the Forest Dark. So essentially, the Trisolarians understood that humankind would definitely surpass them in technology if they did not kill our science. And the Trisolarians in the book have this exact same conversation with themselves that we see in the show. So here's an excerpt from that. Let's observe the facts. Humans took more than 100,000 Earth years to progress from the hunter-gatherer age to the agricultural age. To get from the agricultural age took a few thousand Earth years, but to go from industrial age to the atomic age took only 200 Earth years. Thereafter, in only a few Earth decades, they entered the age of information. This civilization possesses the terrifying ability to accelerate their progress. On Trisolaris, of the more than 200 civilizations, including our own, none has ever experienced such accelerating development. The progress of science and technology in all Trisolaran civilizations has been at a constant decelerating pace. In our world, each technology age requires approximately the same amount of time for steady, slow development. So this is key. So this was the entire reason that they needed to kill science. This is the entire reason that they needed to entangle these Sophons and send a pair of them to Earth to basically keep us in check, so that we did not develop, because they knew that basically our technological development right now is on a scale of exponential development. It's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And it could very well be possible that in 150 years that we could have outpaced them in technology. Perhaps even in 100 years we could have outpaced them in technology. And they absolutely were aware of this. The Sophons were a necessity. And I appreciate that the show is mentioning this, and I appreciate that the show is accurately portraying these concepts and only making minor changes where it serves the story. And like I said, I just really loved this sequence, and the next sequence as well. As the sequence continues, I like it when that we see the Sophon unfold, reflecting the surface of Earth, right? So this is, like I said, a version of the scene we see in the book where it's reflecting the surface of Trisolaris, but of course here it's Earth. In the books, and this is very interesting, I think this is one of the most interesting sections of the book, which is why I think people definitely go and read this section towards the end of the book. It takes the Trisolarans a really long time to figure out how to do this, how to unfold the dimensions of a proton. And all of those conversations between the Trisolaran scientists are very fascinating in my opinion. They attempt it several times, and in one of those instances, in trying to unfold one of these protons, they actually encounter these life forms that are folded up inside a dimension in one of these protons. And these life forms form this giant parabolic mirror in the sky that looks very reminiscent of what we see in the show. And this eye begins to attack the Trisolaran homeworld. And it's one of the most insane, epic, what the heck scenes that is in this first book, and it's not really explained until a little bit later. People noticed the eyes moved faster than the other solids filling the sky, and they were gathering into one spot. Soon, two eyes met and merged into one bigger eye. More and more eyes joined this big eye, and its volume grew. Finally, all the eyes melded into one. It was so large that it seemed to represent the gaze of the universe upon Trisolaris. The iris was clear and bright, and at the center was the image of a sun. Over the broad surface of the eyeball, various colors cascaded in a flood. Soon the details over the giant eye faded and gradually disappeared until it became a pupilless, blind eye. Then it began to deform until it finally lost the shape of an eye and became a perfect circle. When the circle began to slowly rotate, people realized that it was not flat, but parabolic, like a slice cut from a giant sphere. The parabolic mirror focused the sun's beams onto the surface of Trisolaris. Initially, the spot of light was very large, and the heat at the focal point wasn't yet lethal. This spot moved across the ground, searching for its target. The mirror discovered the capital. So this thing is being operated through intelligence. There's intelligent life operating this parabolic mirror, and it is searching for the Trisolaran capital, because it is like these Trisolarans are unfolding our universe, and they're going to kill us all. They're going to kill us all if we don't attack. And so they search for the Trisolaran home, where we can see them searching, and then they essentially start the attack. The mirror discovered the capital, the largest city of Trisolaris, and the light spot began to move toward it. Soon the beam was over the city. Those standing under the pendulum monument only saw a great brightness in space. It overwhelmed everything else, accompanied by a wave of extreme heat. So in this section, and like immediately the Trisolarans freak out. They're like, "This is a parabolic mirror," and they attack it, and they essentially destroy this universe, and they have to start over on the project. But this was a really weird and interesting section of the book that you don't get a lot of explanation for until later. And essentially, it is what I just described to you, like within, folded up in these inside of the proton was another universe that contained life forms that tried to defend themselves. Essentially, it goes all the way back to the scene with Jin where she's got the non bread, and she's like, "I just ate an entire universe." That's the deal with the eye in the book. But of course, in the show, it is a reference to what happens in the book in the show. But in the show, I think it's just a visual representation of the Trisolarans watching humanity in the show. But it is a reference to what happens in the book. And like I said, that is one of my favorite parts of the book. I get why it doesn't exist in the show, but I'm sure they were already pushing. I'm sure they were already pushing their CGI budget. But I'm at least glad that it is referenced, with the scene with the eye, and when Jin talked about potential universes being folded up in lower dimensions. I love this scene, as I said, and all the stuff about multiple dimensions. All of this matters big time later in the book. All of it matters big time. So, we're going to move on again. So, episodes 6 and 7. These two episodes kind of go hand in hand. And in case people didn't hear me in the beginning, I will be reading your super chats at the end of the live stream, so I don't interrupt the flow of the stream. So we will get to the super chats, but we'll read them at the end of the live stream. All right. So episode 6 and 7 kind of go hand in hand to me. So in this pair of episodes, we see that Will, like his book counterpart Tianming, buys a star in honor of Shang-Xin/Jin, and like in the book, it is star DX3906, and what star it is definitely important. And we also see the Staircase Project here, the idea to launch a spy towards the Trisolarian fleet by use of nuclear pulse compulsion. I saw some people have some questions about the Staircase Project and how it works. Essentially, the brain is a spy. They don't know if the spy will return. See, that's the thing. We absolutely, it's a huge gamble. It's a huge gamble. We absolutely do not know if the spy will return, but it's the only chance they really have, and they do have a chance. And it's the only plan that they have either. This is the only thing that they can do at this point. So essentially, Will volunteers, like Tianming, and his brain is used for the Staircase Project. And in the books, the Staircase Project does go off course, like it does in the show. But here's the kicker. Here's the spoiler. The Trisolarans do find it. The Trisolarans absolutely eventually intercept Tianming's brain. They find it, and through Tianming's brain, the Trisolarans gain their most valuable information about humanity. And the plan kind of goes off. The plan works, but it also doesn't work. It works and it doesn't work. So essentially, what's implied is that the Trisolarans, they learn to deceive. They learn to deceive, and this is a big deal later on. But at the same time, Tianming does get a chance to see Shang-Xin again, and a chance to communicate with humanity again. I won't go into the specifics of circumstances of this, but this is, of course, after the location of Earth and Trisolaris are revealed. So both worlds are doomed. So the Trisolarans are like, yeah, you can talk to them. So Tianming/Will, I guess, who has been rebuilt by the Trisolarans, knows information. He has gained information about the universe and the nature of life and existence in the universe that can absolutely help humanity survive. And he delivers this information through fairy tales, because the Trisolarans are watching, and they say, you can't tell. The Trisolarans don't want humans to know this. That's why they're not letting Tianming go back, and that's why they're watching this interaction very closely, because they don't want like him to give her any type of information. So they're watching very closely, but still they're not like the best at deception, so they're not getting everything. So he's able to give her this information through use of the fairy tales, and these fairy tales have like all of these layers of hidden meaning. And I would have to do an entire video breakdown. I have to do an entire live stream to break down all of the meaning of these fairy tales. So I'll just say that these fairy tales contained the secrets for long-term survival in the Dark Forest. So this is why the show keeps showing these paper boats. This is why we keep seeing that Will is reading all these fairy tales, because this is essential. This is essential. It's setting up Tianming's fairy tales that subtly teach humanity how we can actually survive in this universe. So Will's star, DX3906, also will prove to be very important later in the series, because when the sun finally sets on the human solar system, that is the location that Shang Xin and AA head in. They head to the star DX3906. And so I'm very curious to see how this is going to be handled in the show. So yeah, all of that comes up again, and I love seeing it be set up, because, you never know what they're going to do with an adaptation. You don't know what's going to be cut, but I very much appreciate that this adaptation is keeping all of the major beats from the books, and I definitely appreciate it. So that is the deal with the Staircase Project. That is what's up with Tianming's star. It absolutely comes up later in the books, and it's all super interesting. And there's also like it's super interesting, because I've seen people talk about like, oh, what is the nature of owning a star? How can you own a star? And essentially the answer to that is, how can you own anything? Think about it. Throughout all of human history, the only way humans have owned anything is, you point to something and you say it's mine. When people first set foot on new land, do you think no one owned it, and someone just points to it and you say it's mine? You say it's mine, and that's literally all there is to it. If you acknowledge that it's yours and the rest of humanity acknowledges that it's yours, then it's yours. That's literally, if you own your house, what makes you think you own your house? It's a slip of paper that says you own your house. It's because everyone agrees that you own your house. If everyone agrees, then you own it. So that's the deal with the Staircase Project, and that is the deal with the star. So we're going to move on now to cryosleep. Now, cryosleep is super interesting. So we see cryosleep for the first time in episode 7. Cryosleep is obviously like a key part of the series. So it's good to introduce this early. In the books, like, most of the major characters are frozen. You got Thomas Wade, he's frozen. You've got Luo Ji / Saul is going to be frozen. Shang Xin is obviously frozen multiple times. And this is so that characters can be alive for the duration of the series. Because, like I said, the Trisolaran fleet is 400 years away. The Trisolaran fleet is long away, and we've got to keep these characters around. And the same mechanism to keep the characters around is used in the book. So they use cryosleep, and over the course of the book, characters are frozen and unfrozen. So like I said, yeah. So we're not gonna be seeing the last of these characters. There's not gonna be like a time jump, and then we lose all of the major characters. Dasha is also among the characters that is frozen constantly. Okay, so yeah, the cryosleep is essential to keeping this story working, and it's brilliant that they introduced it. It makes perfect sense to introduce it earlier, and it was definitely needed. So now let's talk about something pretty major. Now, this is a discussion that everyone's been having, I think, because it's one of the most interesting parts of the series, and that is cosmic sociology, the Saul Yawinji conversation in the park. I've pulled out some excerpts from the book that go into this, and it's a little bit different from in the show, right? In the show, there's a riddle about not playing with God. This is an obvious riddle referencing the Dark Forest. Like, it's obviously referencing the Dark Forest, but I really think that what is more important about this riddle, because other things in the show reference the Dark Forest, I think that what is more important is that the riddle is leading Saul to where she has placed these books relating to the topic. And I think that Saul will definitely find these books. And that is how he will work out what's going on with cosmic sociology. Now, in the books, obviously the conversation is a lot more direct. And I'm going to read off some of this and talk about it. Now, this is actually at the beginning of the Dark Forest. I've got a suggestion. Why don't you study cosmic sociology? Cosmic sociology? A name chosen at random. Suppose a vast number of civilizations are distributed through the universe on the order of the number of detectable stars. Lots and lots of them. Those civilizations make up the body of cosmic sociology. Make up the body of cosmic society. Cosmic sociology is the study of nature, of the nature of this super society. It's all fascinating, but what would the axioms of cosmic sociology be? First, survival is the primary need of civilization. Second, civilization continuously grows and expands, but the total matter in the universe remains constant. Those two axioms are solid enough for a sociological perspective, but you've rattled them off so quickly like you'd already worked them out, Luoji said, a little surprised. I've been thinking about this for most of my life. I've never spoken about it with anyone before. I don't know why, really. One more thing. To derive a basic picture of cosmic sociology from these two axioms, you need two other important concepts. Chain of suspicion. Definitely watch my video on what makes the forest dark, because I definitely get into all of this. Chains of suspicion and technological explosion. Interesting terms. Can you explain them? Yao Wenji glanced at her watch. There is no time, but you're clever enough to figure it out. So essentially, it's a version of the conversation from what we see in the show, except she's more direct in the book, and there's no like hiding the books and leaving them for him. So with these ideas in place, and what Yao Wenji expects Luoji to figure out is essentially the nature of the Dark Forest. So with these ideas in place, the ultimate picture of cosmic sociology is one where civilizations hide in the darkness of space, attempting not to be noticed. If an advanced civilization notices another civilization, the logical response is to eliminate, as we talked earlier. The Trisolarans don't want humans to figure out that the universe is a dark forest, because they know that if humanity figures out that the universe is a dark forest, then humanity will have the power to reveal the location of Trisolaris. Humanity could threaten to reveal the location of the Trisolaran homeworld. That is why they want Saul/Luoji dead, because Yao Wenji has given him a big hint at the truth. Yeah, so that is essentially why they're attempting to kill him, because they know that now humans might figure it out, and with this knowledge, humans would be able to keep the Trisolarans in what is a state of deterrence. So we do see another book that Yao Wenji is holding, and it says game theory on it, right? So it's basically deterrence game theory. It's the threat of mutually assured destruction, right? So if humanity says, hey, if you attack me, I press this button and it reveals where both of us are and we're all dead. It's the threat of mutually assured destruction. If it can be determined that the person making the threat will absolutely fulfill the threat, then, the only option is for the Trisolarans to stay deterred and to like hold back, right? And the Trisolarans absolutely determine in the book that Luoji/Saul will absolutely fulfill this threat if need be. So it is mutually assured destruction. That's what Yao Wenji wants Saul to realize. He wants him to she wants him to realize the nature of cosmic sociology and to realize that there is a way to, at the very least, keep them at bay. Now, like I said, the success of, deterrence depends, it's absolutely dependent on the willingness of the person holding the button to actually press the button. And so that's what we talked about earlier. Who is it going to be that fulfills the role of Shang Xin? Because this person is the person that essentially... let me jump back a little bit because I'm out of slides. Essentially, when we talked about, through the use of Tianming's brain, the Trisolarans learn some degree of deception, and they use this deception to kind of lull humanity into this sense that the Trisolarans have come around, into this sense that maybe we can coexist. So decades pass by while the Trisolarans are held in this state of deterrence. And all the while, they're lulling humanity into this sense of comfort. So basically, a lot of humans are like, oh, like, we're never going to need to press this button. It's never going to need to happen because the Trisolarans have changed. We can, maybe in the future, we can actually coexist. And so because they have lulled humans into this sense of safety, once Shang Xin, someone that's not really like committed to pressing the button, gets the sword holder button thing, the Trisolarans act immediately because they know that she's not going to press the button. She's no Luo Ji. So I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that in the show and what they're going to change around and whether or not it's going to be Augie or Shang Tsung that does this or whether or not they're going to change it even more and it's going to be something different happening. So we'll definitely see the results of that later. And then, of course, the final episode in this show deals with the wall facers. Now you can watch my video on the wall facers if you want, more details into like the individual wall facers and what they do. But if you watch that video, please do me a favor and click the link in the description and watch the bonus video in the description because it fixes an error that was made in that video that I think is important. So if you watch my wall facer video, please watch the bonus video as well. All right. So I've actually gotten through all of my major notes. And I'm going to go over the super chats and then we're going to go to the chat and we're going to answer any more questions or talk about any other ideas that you guys want to talk about. And spoilers are totally okay for this stream. I've just done a whole hour of spoilers. So we're going to talk about any spoilers for all 3 books. Also spoilers for the spinoff. Anybody that's read that one, all spoilers are fine. So I'm going to start answering super chats. First of all, thank you for becoming a member. Thank you, Strawberry Milk. Thank you, Anya Costa. Thank you, Ed Star. Thank you, Uriel Rocha. SW, thank you. Thank you for your super sticker, Claudio. Thank you also, Chen, for your super sticker. Thanks, Maria, for joining. Thank you, PD Bangelis. P. Bangelis, thank you so much for your super chat. And first question, Nick Gaspard. Now, this is the question that a lot of people have had. Can the Trisolarans terraform planets? It's never clear if they have that technology. But I think the implication is that it's easier to travel to another world that's already a paradise world than to terraform a planet. And then also, I don't know how the I don't know. It never says if they have the technology to completely terraform planets or not. But I guess the implication is that this is the simpler solution. So, because, obviously, if the Trisolarans are very, 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 very advanced, then, why not terraform a closer planet? But the question is, how much time would that take versus, like, just traveling? How much time and energy would they expend terraforming another planet versus traveling to a distant world and taking that planet? It's not exactly clear, but that is an interesting question that I know there has been debate about in the 3-body problem community. So thank you for your question. T-Car, thank you for your super sticker. Thanks so much. Fing Book says, for your work over the years, you have been an authority on science fiction for sure. Go. Thank you so much. But I consider myself just a science fiction fan, just like everybody else. Let's see. Another super chat. Dylan Osborne says, do you think season 2 will be significantly more expensive to produce due to the future sets and droplet battle? Well, yeah. And I'm wondering how they're going to do it, actually. I wonder if the droplet is going to be the major event of season 2 or if they're going to reserve that for like later. But yeah, definitely it is seeming like it's going to be more expensive just because of like the nature of it. Yeah, there is traveling to the future and there's a lot going on. There's the underground city, like you said. We've got the entire Space Force at this point. We've got like the battle, the Doomsday battle essentially. So there's going to be a lot of expensive CGI. So, but like I said, I would be pretty shocked if Netflix has started this project with these two huge showrunners, because like I said, hate them or not, hate David and Dan or not, they're 2 of the biggest showrunners in the world. So I feel like it would be weird if they were hired without the guarantee that there'd be multiple seasons. You know what I mean? It'd be a little, I don't think that would happen. But I could be wrong. I might eat those words and the show gets canceled, but I really hope it doesn't. Thank you so much for your super chat, Toss AW. Max Silva says, it's sad to lose the extra unfolding scenes, but it was a good call for dramatic pacing. They needed to close the episode with a sense of defeat to mitigate the sense of victory from Judgment Day. Yes, I agree. A lot of the changes in the show were definitely done for the sake of pacing, and I agree with a lot of them, even though I'm a little bit, there are cool scenes, and like I said, I loved that scene in the book, and I would have loved to seen that sequence here. But I also really loved the scene that we got. I loved their interpretation of it. I loved the adaptation that we got ultimately. Catching Flight says, "Hey Quinn, do you think we'll see Will's Fairy Tales on the show as a form as VR story like the three?" Okay, interesting. Because in the book, there's a whole thing where basically Shang Tsung goes into outer space and she meets with Tian Ming, and it's like a whole thing where the Trisolarans are watching. But the VR thing might be a way that they could do it. I don't know if they necessarily would change it if they didn't need to, because like this obviously takes place. The sequence would take place, like way in the future, like hundreds of years have passed. Let's see, at what point? I think it's about 200 years that have passed by the time that this happens. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they would use it. It's a way they could go about doing it for sure. Thank you for your super chat. Marco says, how did the Trisolarans learn of the Dark Forest? Did they confirm it from somewhere else like we did, but they were still alive to hide it from us? Interesting. Well, maybe they determined it through just basic logical extrapolation, just like someone like Yao Wenji did. You know what I mean? It's just like if you take sociology and you extrapolate to the cosmic level, if you take those axioms and extrapolate, there's only one logical endpoint. There's only one logical result. So I think the Trisolarans had just figured it out over the time that they've been alive, essentially. Thank you for your super chat. Keller Elise says, I was wondering what your thoughts were about follower looking like Vera Ye. Any possible implications? Follower. I'm not sure what you're referencing here. About follower looking like Vera Ye. Not sure what you're referencing. Not totally sure. But we'll get back to that if we can get some more information on your question. But thank you for your super chat. Silver Scale says, wouldn't the cosmic sociology book writers also propose the mutually assured destruction in a post-nuclear world? It's not an obscure solution. That's a good point. It's kind of a good point, but I don't know. Maybe the book. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's in the books. I can't really say. Maybe that book. Maybe those are real books that exist somewhere that we can find. Maybe I'll have to look for those. I don't know. I don't know, but that's a good. It's a good point to bring up because it is kind of like if you take those ideas and you think about them a little bit, there's only one end point that you can come to essentially, or at least that's the idea that's presented in the book, is that there's only, if you take these ideas and you extrapolate, there's only one end idea that you can get to, which that's that the universe is a dark forest. So I don't know. Interesting. But I agree with you, Silver Scale. I agree with you. Thank you for your super chat. Joseph Sullivan says, I don't get the symbolism of the joke in this show about playing with God. Could you explain? Well, essentially, there's like a higher, more advanced species, and they exist. And then you start playing your instrument, and they notice you, and you've revealed yourself. So you're making noise now, and you've revealed yourself because you're like, I'm gonna communicate with the higher species. It's like humans. We're trying to communicate with like the higher races, and we're shouting out. We're playing our instrument, but little did we know, God doesn't want to be played with. These species don't want to play with us. They don't want to join forces with us. We're not going to start the Federation. We're not going to have a cosmic society of that nature. So it's like, don't play with God. Don't try to contact these people because it's only going to hurt you. That is essentially what the joke means, in my opinion. So, mutually, thank you for your super chat, by the way. And another super chat from Muffin Man says, mutually assured destruction is the only thing that scares the hell out of me because it could happen. Does it scare you? Of course. It's so scary. Mutually assured destruction is definitely super scary because I feel like, I think about this maybe too often, but I feel like it only takes like a few crazy world leaders, a few people that are just crazy and that have lost it all, to damage everybody. So that definitely is something that definitely scares me, the idea of mutually assured destruction. And that's part of the reason that this book series is so scary, because it definitely reflects real things about human nature and human society. That's why the ideas in this book ring true and are so like freaky and scary. Another one from Superscale. Thank you so much. Pour one out for Voyager on its last days carrying the golden record. Our message to the stars, the farthest we ever seen an object. Farthest we ever sent an object to space, launched in 1977. Project lasted 5 years, lasted 47. Project to last 5 years, lasted 47. Absolutely, shout out to Voyager. Let's hope it does not get picked up by an evil alien race. But honestly, truth be told, by the time an alien race encountered the Voyager probe, like, we might be long gone. We might have already left the solar system by then. So, who knows? Who knows? Maybe it'll keep going and just like run right into a wall. Maybe it'll run right into a wall. Be like the first episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Like they're trying to go out further into space and they run right into the queue. It's a giant wall. Go no further. All right, so that's the end of the super chats for now. I'll now look at the regular chat and we'll just hang out here, and because ran out of my notes, ran out of my slides. So we'll just hang out here and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Okay. We'll just talk about any more questions about Three-Headed Problem or Remembrance of Earth's past trilogy, any more interesting topics. Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Follower is the little girl from the game. Okay, let's get back to that. I was wondering what your thoughts about Follower looking like a young Vera Ye. Any possibilities or implications? Well, we know that Wenji was the founder of ETO. We don't know like what role Wenji had in the development of the game, but it is quite possible that it's like an Easter egg that she put her in the game. But it doesn't strike me as something that's relevant. You know what I mean? If I had to guess, it doesn't strike me as something that's really relevant at all. So I would have to say definitely possible implications, but I don't think there's anything super significant, but I could be wrong. Gaio says the Sophon scene is brilliant. Is the third book adaptable, says someone. Okay, is the third book adaptable? Yes, but the key word is adaptable, because I think changes have to be made with a book like that, because some of it is very abstract. A lot of it is very abstract as you get closer to the end of the third book, and we're dealing with more and more time, and we're dealing with, we're dealing with like the bending dimensions and fragments of different dimensions, and we're dealing with the pocket universe and death lines, and there's so many concepts that are kind of more and more abstract as the series goes on, and especially in that third book, that it is going to be more difficult to adapt. But we'll see. Okay. Let's see. Someone says the Trisolarans will find Voyager. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. See, that's the thing about the Dark Forest hypothesis, is that like we were talking about earlier, it's freaky because it feels like it could almost be true, because it's based off the way that human beings interact with each other, except with a chain of suspicion that stretches across space. Like with human beings, communication between like separate human entities, right? There is definitely a chain of suspicion, but there is a much shorter chain of suspicion due to the fact that we're all on Earth, due to the fact that we share a culture, due to the fact that we share like a species. Often we share languages, so the chain of suspicion is a lot shorter on Earth than it is in outer space, right? You can never be sure what type of species this is, if they're hostile, if they're lying about being hostile. You can never be sure of anything when it comes to communicating over great distances of space. So, that's where the chain of suspicion comes from. So, like I said, that idea, I definitely explore that idea deeply in my video on what makes the forest dark, and there's definitely visual aids in that video as well, because I think it's essentially needed to get that idea across in a good way. Now let's see. Can you explain the quantum entanglement bit a little more? Well, to the extent that I understand it, quantum entanglement is basically when quantum objects like protons are entangled at the quantum level, right? And so essentially they're connected to each other, and there can be transfer of information even if these objects are spatially separated, no matter the distance. And it seems to be like this instantaneous transfer of information. Like I said, I'm not a physicist. I don't understand really the intricacies of the quantum world and the nature of the quantum world. So essentially, that is my understanding. And so that is why they etch a computer onto an unfolded proton, because they can then fold it back into its smallest state, and because it's entangled on this quantum level, there can be this instantaneous transfer of information. So that's the deal with that. I hope that explains it. Like I said, not a physicist. Thank you for your super chat. Can the Sophons make anyone hallucinate? Countdown. Okay, well, it's not exactly a hallucination. It is a projection onto the iris, right? So they're projecting it onto the iris in some weird way. So that's essentially how they do it. And yes, they can essentially do it to anyone. Now, I will point out that scene at the end of episode 8, where you've got Mike Evans and his plane loses power and he sees Sophon. That to me is okay. I don't know if that to me is a little bit loose, because I'm like, I don't know if the Sophon should be able to create a perfect image of Sophon standing right in front of him. But what I will give them grace is, I will say that this could have been a sequence depicting like both Sophons focusing all of their energy on this particular plane to create this, to turn the power off for a little bit and to create this image of Sophon standing there. Because I feel like if the Sophon can do that, it's almost too powerful. But if it's both Sophons focusing all their energy on Wade and trying to make him see this, I feel like maybe they can do it. But this shouldn't be something that they can just do willy-nilly at all points in time. So that's my take on that. Looks like I got another super chat from AJ. Since they could unfold protons into 3 dimensions, and when they did it was huge, I wonder if they could make giant machinery with the particles. Oh, potentially, I think so. But it is a flat plane, so I don't know. I don't know. Essentially, maybe I don't know. Potentially. And by the way, we've got about 1,800 people watching right now. So if you've been enjoying the stream so far, please hit the like button. It helps out YouTube. Crazy, insane algorithm really helps. So please hit the like button if you've been enjoying the live stream. Please hit the like button. Okay. Let's see what we got going on. Let's see. Damien Labat says, I interpret it as the countdown being drawn in their vision by Sophon moving in the path numbers, drawing it with its body, so to speak. Super possible. Because that's the thing. That's why, to me, the countdown, to me, makes sense. Because I like how it's not exactly... The countdown is not exactly like totally like visually like defined. It's kind of shaky. So that's why another reason that the scene at the end bothered me a little bit with this fully formed Sophon image that appeared right there standing in front of Thomas Wade. Because I'm like, why is the countdown wobbly, but she's this perfect image? But like I said, if I interpreted it as it being like, this is the Sophon really focusing on this one area, trying to do it, both Sophons maybe working together, then it makes sense to me that way. Let's see. Quinn, what do you imagine the Trisolarans look like? So there's a lot of debate about what the Trisolarans look like. Definitely the spin-off says that they're small and that they're the size of grains of rice, but who knows what Shishinla's original idea was. I did notice, like, rereading, going through this first book again, that it does make references to Listener's fingers, like his tiny little fingers, which I don't think is really in the spin-off. So, I don't know. I imagine that they're kind of these almost gelatinous looking beings that can kind of because if they can dehydrate, right, it makes me think of water bears. So these kind of like watery, gelatinous beings that can totally dehydrate themselves, and maybe they've got like little feelers and fingers and things that can kind of extend from themselves. I don't know exactly what they look like, but that would be my image of them. You can also check out my video that one of my mods just linked in the description, the biology of the Trisolarans, and that's when I talk about the spin-off book Redemption of Time and what it says about the way they operate in their biology in that book, mostly in line with what's in the original series. So yeah, let's see. Someone says, it's hard to believe they could not interpret human thought. Facebook can do it with the technology they should be. But you see, the thing, the Sophon hasn't been on Earth for very long, and they're kind of they're training themselves on human thought. They're training themselves on it. But Facebook also has like it was built by humans. It was so it's already from the perspective of humanity. Like it's trying to interpret a completely different species. It doesn't make sense. I'm sure if we encountered like a different species, even if our technology is more advanced, it's gonna take a while for us to be able to interpret everything about them and the way they function and the exact nature of them. But yeah, but it's also one of those things where it's like the story needs to happen. So yeah, it's one of those things. Someone says maybe the Sophons can ask Chat GPT. Be interesting. Yes, exactly, John. Tardigrades. Tardigrades. I imagine that maybe their makeup is somehow similar to tardigrades, except maybe bigger, but then maybe small, like the spinoff says. This is a good point. Someone says the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy and Dune's hexology are similar in terms of big ideas blossoming from seemingly small story plot, ultimately exploring humanity's survival. Absolutely. That first Three Body Problem book starts off so small, really, and so simple. You're mainly focusing on one character, and it really, really expands to be about all of humanity and about the history of life in the universe and the history of the dimensions of the universe. It's really, really cool how it does that. And Dune does something very similar. I don't know if Dune necessarily starts off small. Dune starts off as a pretty big plot, but it is mainly focused on one character and in one family, maybe, and then it definitely expands and starts focusing on the entire human universe and what's happening with the entire human universe. So definitely, I do see that thread of similarity, although Three Body Problem definitely takes it very, 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 very far. The Three Body Problem universe, we go millions of years in the future, as opposed to tens of thousands of years in the future in Dune. So, yeah, but I definitely see that thread of similarity. Oh, this is a very good question, Arturo. How do the Sophons reach Earth a lot quicker than 400 years required to travel from planet to planet, and even in light years? And they do mention this in the show. It's because a proton can actually be sped up to light speed pretty easily. And we can actually do this in our atomic colliders. We can actually do that now and speed tiny, tiny quantum objects to light speed. So that's how they did it. They sped it to light speed and they sent it shooting across. They sent it right to us. They sent it right to us at near light speed. So that's essentially how they did it. Yeah, because the quantum world is crazy and it doesn't make sense. And anytime that I can, I like to listen to just talks from scientists. I read books where I can about these things, even though I've got shaky understanding of it. Because the quantum world is very interesting, and it's not something that people really understand, that a lot of people really understand that well. And it doesn't. There's a lot of weird things about the quantum world that don't really align, with the macroscopic world. So it's very interesting, very, very, very interesting. How do they even put a computer on a proton? Because we mentioned in the series that folded up inside of this proton is a lot of space hidden in other dimensions. So by unfolding this dimension, they can access that hidden space, and they can use that space to etch a computer onto this flat 2D plane, essentially. So it's a quantum computer. It is a quantum computer, like it's a real quantum computer. So yeah. it does make sense if you think about it. If you're willing to bend your mind a little bit, it can make sense. And I think it's very, very, very interesting. Someone says, "This is my first time catching a Quinn stream live." Well, good for you. Good for you. Happy to be here. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Someone says multicellularity is not necessarily required for complex life. Interesting. Someone says ultimately we have a fuzzy understanding of quantum physics because it just quantum physics defies the laws of physics from what I can tell from like people that get these things and people that do these things for a living is that quantum physics is we understand it, but at the same time it's very, very difficult to wrap your mind around. And the only way that scientists really understand it is the numbers. Is like you understand the equations and you understand the numbers, but then when you look at the real world, it's like, wait, it's really hard to grasp, essentially. Looks like we got another super chat. Thank you so much, Muffin Man. I imagine the Trisolarans as plankton from SpongeBob, but like far, far, far advanced. That'd be very interesting. And also, I will say that the idea of the Trisolarans being small, which is the idea introduced in the spinoff, is kind of in line, in my opinion, with, you know, the end of the first book where they call humanity bugs because it's kind of like this kind of insecurity. Maybe it was like, oh, you're the bugs. And I will say that the spin-off Redemption of Time does have it does give a good reason for them being so small, and why they really, really needed to kind of destroy humanity before they got there. It's because they're so small and they know they would never be able to face humanity, body to body, because we're so much bigger than them and we could just like crush them with our actual physical bodies. So they understood that and they knew that they need to do other things to kind of take us on. And one of those things was the Sophon, and another thing was the droplet, which we haven't talked about in this video, but the droplet is another piece of technology that the Trisolarans discover like after the fact. See, that's the thing too. As humans are developing over the course of the books, the Trisolarans are also developing. At some point, they also launch another fleet that is actually moving faster than their original fleet. Right? They launch another fleet that's moving faster because the technology has developed even further. They also launch a droplet, which is absolutely insane. It's like the densest object in the universe. It's like the on the atomic level. I remember the book saying something like this droplet, this device that they send hurling at the solar system. On the atomic level, it's as if the atoms were hammered together. Like it's the densest object imaginable. And it mentions that this object, this droplet, could potentially cut through the Earth like it was nothing. This object could go right through the core of the Earth and be fine. So the Trisolaran technology definitely develops. But make no mistake, human technology develops as well over the course of this series. And we do fight back. Humanity fights back. We take losses and we take some wins. And it's a whole thing. And then eventually, even the series, like someone mentioned earlier, it just keeps going. It just keeps going. Eventually, we move even past the Trisolarans. Eventually, the Trisolarans are no longer the big threat. Someone says, "Who is Singer?" And yes, I do have a video on Singer. If you go to my video, "The Deadliest Weapon in the Universe," that is about Singer and his race. So Singer is a member of a race of an even more distant, even more advanced alien race. And these beings make the Trisolarans look like pipsqueaks. These guys have technology that's absolutely inconceivable, like technology that can completely collapse dimensions. So Singer's race is actually insane. So yeah, definitely check out my video on the deadliest weapon in the universe if you want to learn more about Singer's race. So yeah, that's a cool part of the book as well. So Mickey Thor says, "I need more about the droplet. How does Will/Ming contribute to that?" Well, Tianming's contribution to humanity is after the whole droplet incident. So the droplet puts humanity in a bind, to say the least. And because of the presence of the droplet, basically the droplet comes to the solar system, and Luoji is able to deter the Trisolarans and to deter the droplet from basically conquering all of Earth, by this threat of mutually assured destruction, right? And after the threat of deterrence is carried out like decades and decades and decades later. The Trisolarans allow communication between Will slash Tianming to Shang Xin, and in this communication, Will basically communicates like secrets about like surviving in the dark forest in the universe. So it doesn't really have to do exactly with the droplet. So it's something that relates to the droplet loosely, but it's yeah, it's later. It's later. Um, Thank you for your super chat, Just Let. Music Cat says, "You have any interest in the Halo series slash universe? I have never played any of the games. I've never read any of the books. I have not seen the show. People have totally mentioned those the books and the games to me a lot. Along with I think Mass Effect is one that people are constantly telling me to play. I have not played the games. I would be interested in the universe. I don't tend to like games that are shooter type games. I'm more of a fan of, like games like Stellaris, Surviving Mars, like Frostpunk, like City Skylines. Strategy games are games that I tend to gravitate towards. But nothing against it. Nothing against it. It's just not my type of thing necessarily. Even though I do definitely appreciate the sci-fi aspect of it. Is Singer's Race likely the top? Well, in the spinoff, the spinoff series gets to some of this, and I think I'm shaking on the details. I need to reread the spinoff Redemption of Time again. It's a shorter book, um, and it's not considered totally canon by a lot of people. But in that one, I think it does mention that this is a very, very old race that they have existed for a very, very long time. But to say they are the top, I don't know. I don't know if they're the top. Definitely check out my video, Master Races of the Universe, because there's definitely like there's more guys that are doing more things. There's like the Zero Homers who like want to reset the universe. There's definitely different groups that are doing different things that could potentially be more powerful. See, that's the thing in a universe so large, right? In a universe so large, um, certain species like humanity might advance technologically speaking very fast, but that doesn't mean that there's not another species that advances even faster, and that doesn't mean there's not a species that's even faster than that. It's kind of like on Earth, like there's always going to be someone that's faster than you. There's always going to be someone that's better than you at doing something. It's the same in the universe. There's always going to be faster species that develop. So maybe they're the top. They're likely not though. Thank you for your super sticker, Patty. Darth Patty. Thanks so much. Um, the show's bad. The showrunners admitted that they basically did not research the game. That is not true at all. It's not true. I'm seeing a lot of like weird things about the showrunners that like absolutely aren't true. Lots of weird things about the show that aren't true. I've seen a lot of misinformation about like what the show does. I don't know like what exactly is floating around. I don't know like why people that have not watched the show feel the need to comment on it. Like if you don't like the show, just don't watch it. You don't gotta comment on the show if you don't like it. You certainly don't gotta make up things about are that aren't real. Okay, so I think I got another super chat. Yeah, there's one thing I don't quite understand. If the Sophons can see everything happening on Earth, why can't they look into the human mind? Because they can't look into the human mind. They can see everything on the outside, but they can't look inside the mind. They just can't. It's just one of the limitations of the supercomputer is that it cannot look into the human mind. It just can't. It is just simply one of its limitations. Um, Thank you for your super chat. Your top three book series. I love your channel. Thank you for all the work you put into your content. Top three book series right now. I'm just gonna go with science. I'm gonna go with top three science fiction right now. Definitely the Children of Time series. Adrian Tchaikovsky. Definitely read that one. This one is still this list also changes a lot, and also obviously Three Body Problem series is great. And then obviously the Dune series, phenomenal series. I like the Culture books, Ian Banks. So that's four for you right there. Those are all really good series. Um, yeah, check those out. Check those out. Oh, okay, never mind. Sorry. So we were talking about Halo. I thought you were talking about. I owe you an apology. I thought you were talking about the game and the three body problem show. So I was like, what are you talking about? But I get you were talking about Halo. My mistake. My bad. You were talking about Halo. My mistake. That is my mistake. So yeah, I don't know anything about the Halo show or the Halo showrunners or anything that they've done. So yeah, I don't know anything about the Halo show. Oh yeah, did I forget Hyperion? Hyperion is also an excellent book series. I think Hyperion. I think a lot of people will be fine with just reading the first two Hyperion books. But like the completionists will want to read the second two, especially if you like things like Dune, because of the way Hyperion, like jumps like hundreds and hundreds of years in the future. It does the same thing. It does the same thing. Again, I'm sorry that I thought you were talking about three body problem. I apologize. I apologize. Let's see. Kevin Collinin says, how would an advanced species like Trisolarans be able to evolve in a three body system that has chaotic era potentially wiping out all life and resetting the process for a few hundred years? The answer is very slowly. That's why their technological progression is so slow because they can't predict, the when the chaotic errors will come and go. So that's why their progression is so slow, and that's why they really felt the need to limit, to kill humans' technological progression. So the answer is very slowly, very very slowly. But that's it's the same with Earth, right? Life on Earth. There's life that fills every niche on Earth from like the harshest environments. Every niche is filled. Like places where you would think that Earth, that life could never, ever, ever survive. There's still life. So, I think that's to be considered too. Let's see. Super sticker. Thank you so much, Just Jet. Again, if you've been watching the stream, please do me a favor and hit the like button. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you've enjoyed the conversation and the discussion, please, please, please hit the like button. Someone says, Dylan Osborne says, at the pace the show is going, I think season 2 is going to be half wallbreaker stuff and half droplet stuff. I think you might be right. I think you might be right. Now, I do think that they maybe sped up the pace a little bit in the first season to move past the first book to get to, like the main stuff. And I think that makes sense, but I think they can maybe slow the pacing a little bit for the Dark Forest and Death's End. There is one thing that I think that they should there is one aspect of the Dark Forest that I absolutely think they should shrink and change. And I've basically talked to a lot of book fans and a lot of people that have read the books that I know basically agree, is that in the opening of Dark Forest, it basically takes way too long to get to Luoji being frozen the first time and to, Luoji's spell at that distant star. It all takes too long to get to the point because Luoji's like having a family and like doing all it takes too long to get to the point. So if that was cut down a bunch, I think it actually would help the narrative, because it's, to me, that's a weaker section, and especially the second book. I feel like that's the weaker section of the book. Quinn, do you have any black friends? Look at my Instagram. Why are you asking me that stupid question? Check my Instagram. Anyway, okay, I can't say that name. I still don't get how a sieve so advanced as to manipulate protons can't just build orbital space habitats, so they no longer need a planet to disassemble a planet into halves. Was that ever explained? It's not completely explained, but I would say that I feel like it's also cultural. I feel like the Trisolarans, they have this dream of a paradise planet. So I think they have a dream of a paradise planet, and that's what they want, and that's what they're seeking out. Um, yeah, so I think that's mainly what the deal is. But yeah, I mean, they could build orbital space habitats. I mean, they build an entire fleet. Like, of course they could. I think it's, I think it's a matter of having. I think it's a matter of having a world, a home that is stable and nurturing. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Um, Thank you for doing this and all your other videos for these books. Got into them and the show because finding your vids. Cheers. Oh, thanks so much. Love you, man, but nobody I know talks like you. Dude, get to know more people. Like, get to know more black people that live in different parts of the world and different parts of the country. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, honestly, what is wrong with you? You do not say I love you, but no one I know talk. Don't say that. Like, God, my brain. Like, don't even say that. You're lucky you're not banned right now. Don't even talk to me anymore. Like, don't say that. Get out of here. Get out of here with that. I hate that. I hate that. Get out of here. You obviously don't know that many black people. That if you don't know anybody that talks like me, get out of here. Let's see. Quinn, you energized my passion for sci-fi. Bought the Dune trilogy coming in soon based off your passion for the series. Awesome. Awesome. See, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. Like to get more people to read science fiction. And yeah, I feel like science fiction is like I've always said science fiction is such a powerful genre because it's about what humanity could be. It's about the potential of humanity. It's about the things that we can strive for in the future. And I went through a big fantasy phase. I love fantasy, but like the thing about fantasy is that fantasy a lot of times is focused on the past. You know, it's you're set in this feudal society. It's about like it's the fantasy of things that have happened in the past. Like that's why there's so much medieval fantasy in the past. Whereas like the future, you get the opportunity to like ask the question, what could the future of humanity be like? And that is such a compelling idea. That is to me that is so compelling, and that's why I feel like the last like I don't know 7 years I've been on this huge science fiction binge, and I just cannot get enough science fiction. Maybe the pendulum will swing back, and I'll get more into fantasy later. But for right now, I feel like science fiction has really been a genre that's been drawing me in, and I also think that the last 10 years, I feel like we've entered into like a really great age of really good science fiction coming out. You know, you got The Expanse series, you got like all the work that Adrian Tchaikovsky is doing, and I think Adrian Tchaikovsky is like just an amazing writer that's up and coming in science fiction. He has so many amazing books. This series as well. I just think there's a lot of good science fiction that's being written right now. And I think that's great. I think that's great, and I feel like we're in a nice age of science fiction and a nice age of science fiction adaptations. Right, we've got the Dune show happening, and I of course did not like the Foundation show. I know some people enjoyed it, but got the found at least something like Foundation getting adapted is like pretty impressive. And we got this really good Dune adaptation. We've got the Three Body Problem coming now. There's been talks for Hyperion. I know that Children of Time, Adrian Tchaikovsky's series, is in the early stages, the very, very early stages of pre-development. So I do feel like we are in an age of science fiction that is just like, yeah, we're getting things done. Hulk Hogan's Giant, great name. Thanks for all you have. Thanks for all you have produced over the years. Quality content, and Dune and Three Body Problem always reel me in. Dreams are the future. Absolutely, absolutely, Hulk Hogan. Absolutely. Thank you for your super chat. So someone says the first Foundation season was strong at first. I liked the opening, but I feel like for Foundation is not one of those things where you can. That's a hard one to adapt, right? And the direction that they went in with Foundation was to do this long storyline thing that's really about the characters. And I feel like making Foundation about that's one that's you can't do that with Foundation, right? You can make something like Three Body Problem more about the characters if you do it right. It's gonna be way harder to do that with Foundation because Foundation is when I say Three Body Problem, it's not about the characters. Foundation is really not about the characters. So by focusing on the characters, you're defeating the purpose, and then it's not even about what the book is about anymore. With Three Body Problem, that's something where you can focus more on the characters and still maintain the ideas. With Foundation, you can't focus on the characters and still maintain the ideas because it's about like humanity over like large periods of time. Like the first book itself like jumps hundreds and hundreds of years. It keeps jumping. So I don't know. I don't know. Quinn, have you watched For All Mankind? I think I've seen that promo on Apple TV. Is it any good? Because I would like to know if that is good. I have seen a few good things in Apple TV before that they've made that I've enjoyed. I like I really enjoyed the Tom Hanks movie that I'm blanking on the title of it right now, but it was Tom. Someone might know. It was Tom Hanks, and he's got this little robot, and he's got a dog, and he's got his robot, and he's got his dog, and it's about him surviving in this dystopian world. I watched it one night, and it was like just this cute little dystopian movie that I thought was really nice, and I enjoyed that one a lot. So I've seen a couple things on Apple TV that I have enjoyed as far as science fiction. I did watch a couple seasons of C. Oh, it's called Finch. That was it. It was called Finch. Good movie. Definitely try it. I've seen a couple seasons of C. I feel like that kind of got not great as it went on. Um, and I also think what's it called? Severance. Severance is an excellent show on Apple TV. If you've ever heard of Severance, it is science fiction. It is reflective of the modern world and like how people live and how people work and how people interact with each other at work versus not at work. And it's a very good concept. It's a really good concept. Do yourself a favor and watch Severance if you haven't, for sure. Looks like I got a couple super chats while I was talking. Allison says, "What did you think of the Judgment Day in the show? I enjoyed that scene. I thought I understand why they added families to it, to make it more dramatic, to make it more impactful, and to make Augie's reaction to it make more sense. I thought it was brutal and I thought it was effective. And everyone that I've talked to that I know in like my real life that has watched the show really, really say that episode 5 when this happened was the moment where they were like, "Oh my god." Um, and by the way, that's what I love about the show too. My mother-in-law watched the Three Body Problem, which is like, what? I never thought that like people are watching this show that would never read the books, and which is why I think ultimately the show is a success. People are watching the show and getting these ideas that would never read the book. So I think that was handled well, and I think the show in general is has been handled well, and it's very accessible. I think it's definitely a skill to be able to make something more accessible. Justin C says, "Read the trilogy thanks to you. Awesome. What scene/sequence do you look forward to most being portrayed? For me, it's the Dimensional Strike. The Dimensional Strike is definitely up there. Um, but I know, obviously the droplet scene, because for David and Dan, um, I remember like years and years ago them saying when they were doing Game of Thrones, like the one scene they really wanted to do that they wanted to get to was the Red Wedding, and that's the whole reason they basically did the show was so they could get to the Red Wedding. I could see the droplet scene being the reason that they did this show. So I think the droplet scene is gonna be crazy. Was the Sophon winking real or a retinal projection? The Sophon winking was just a taunt. I think it was just a taunt. I assume you're talking about. I assume you're talking about the eye in the sky. So I think that was just basically a taunt, like we are watching you. Essentially, is what that meant. Okay. So someone says, "For All Mankind is very solid NASA punk." Okay, interesting. It does have ups and downs, but it's worth sticking with and has some awesome set piece moments. Great. Maybe that's one that I'll give a try because I always love a new sci-fi thing to watch. I tried Beacon 23. I kind of fell off on that because it was a little bit Beacon 23 was like one of those where it was like, why does this beacon exist? What are we doing at this beacon? What is the point of this whole show? It was one of those where I might go back into Beacon 23 and try and give it another chance, but it was one of those where it's like I got too many things to do in the daytime than watch a show that potentially is going nowhere. Thank you for your super chat, Quinn. Have you ever thought about covering the progress of sci-fi novel adaptations in cinema over the last few decades? Now that would be interesting. That would be interesting because I do feel like these adaptations have gotten more better. That's the thing. I feel like people are very critical. People are very critical on adaptations, and I think that adaptations are getting better in a way. A lot of older adaptations will complete like some of these older adaptations of science fiction books that you've seen, even ones that are like iconic, Jurassic Park, Logan's Run. A lot of these have like, if you read the book version, 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you read the book version, it's so different. Well, 2001: A Space Odyssey isn't actually an adaptation. It's a weird story with the construction of that book. That book was actually made in conjunction with the movie. Like the book and the movie were done at the same time. It's a weird story with that one. But anyway, when it comes to sci-fi adaptations or just adaptations in general, I feel like they have gotten better. I do think they've become more accurate in a lot of ways. I feel like more and more people that are making these adaptations understand the necessity to maintain the original ideas and source material, and I think that's good. And maybe that is something that I will cover in the future. Timon C says, Uni really took away the joy of reading, but when I found your channel, I fell in love again with sci-fi. Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. That's exactly why I'm here. All right, so I got one more super chat, and then we're gonna wind down because we have been going for 2 hours. Like I said, please hit the like button. Tell me, have you guys been enjoying the stream? Let me know. Have I done a good job? I always worry if I've been too rambly in my streams, if I'm speaking well, if I'm speaking coherently and making sense. So let me know if I've done a good job, please. And get to this last super chat. I thought the eyes in the sky in the book was never fully explained and implied to be some sort of ultra dimensional beings hidden within poking through. We actually did talk about this earlier in the stream. So if you just go back a little bit to earlier in the stream to when we were talking about the eyes in the sky, we talk about this in detail. So go to that, and you actually are correct. They were beings that were folded up in dimensions that didn't want to be destroyed, so they attacked Trisolaris. And it's never fully explained in the first book. Really, you don't really get what's going on until you have the context of what happens in the Dark Forest and Death's End. All right, thank you guys. Thank you guys. I hope that I've done a good job of the stream. I am not a live performance person. I like to record my things and edit it and upload the video. But I like to come in here live sometimes with you guys because I feel like this is a really great format to just talk directly to the audience and to see what ideas you guys have and to see what questions you guys have. Yeah, so please follow me on Twitter/X. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed. Please hit the like button. And thank you guys so much for watching. And I appreciate you all so much. And I think we'll get out of here. Thanks, guys.